All right, here we are for another biology video. This video is going to start another section in our evolution unit. As you can see, it's going to be about the evidence of evolution. How do we know what we know? And so in the last video, we ended with this image of the great tree of life. And basically, I said that all of the species that we have on the planet today are here because of natural selection and speciation, right? Reproductive isolation plus the selection of good traits versus bad traits, and we get all these different organisms, right? But how do we know that that's true? And so first we have to talk about a small technicality for a minute here. First off, evolution is defined as the change in a population over time. And it's that simple, right? If the population changes over time, then it has evolved. And so, by that definition, evolution itself is a fact. We have seen evolution happen. We've seen antibiotic resistant bacteria. We know that there's humans with big spleens. We know that the peppered moths changed from mostly light to mostly dark, right? We know these things are a fact. But there is another part of evolution called the theory of evolution that says that all organisms share a common ancestor and are therefore related, right? And so this one is not listed as fact. And sometimes this trips people up when they're trying to think about what evolution is all about, because they see this word theory and they think that theory means hypothesis. Because when most people say things like, oh, I have a theory about that, what they're really saying is I have a hypothesis about that, right? And so a hypothesis is a guess, but a theory is a hypothesis that has been tested many, 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 many times and supported many, many, many times. However, there's something about it that prevents you from completely proving it 100%, right? And so the theory of evolution is based on a lot of evidence that we're going to be talking about, but it's also based on some pretty straightforward ideas that come just from understanding the regular part of evolution, right? That living things can only come from other living things. And so the only way to have life is to be born from some other animal. And so you can trace each individual back to their parents and then back to their parents and back to their parents and back to their parents. And it all has to kind of lead somewhere. And we know that the new species must have come from previous species, right? And so again, if you trace the timeline back and you kind of replay natural selection and speciation backwards, you would end up at something called a common ancestor. And so the theory of evolution basically stems from just the basic knowledge of natural selection. But using that idea, we have come up with this very simple tree of life that shows bacteria over here. And then these things called archaea are like these weird types of extreme environment bacteria. And then over here are the eukaryotes, which includes the animals, right? And so this is basically a model. It's not the same kind of model that we've been drawing where you have like the text boxes and arrows and things like that. But we do have the lines that connect things, and it makes a visual representation of our understanding. And so this model is based off of the theory of evolution. But actually, people are more familiar with theories in science than you would think. There's another theory that is out there called atomic theory, right? Maybe you've learned about this before, but our idea is that everything is made out of atoms, and that atoms are made out of electrons and protons and neutrons if you have them, but there's this nucleus with the electron going around the outside. And so that's what this image is showing. This is a model of an atom. And even though people have been studying atoms for quite a while now, we've always just had atomic theory because no one had the capability of actually seeing an actual atom, right? It wasn't until very recently where an image like this was made, which is the clearest picture of a single atom that you can find, right? I believe this is an element of strontium, an atom of strontium, and they were able to suspend it very briefly and take a picture, right? So that little circle that's an atom, one single atom. But even in that actual picture, you can't see protons and electrons. We just have to just know that they're there. We know that they're there because of all of the experiments that have been done that support the idea that they are there. Just like in evolution, we know that these things had to have happened, but there's something preventing us from actually knowing 100% that this is how it happened. And that one thing for evolution is called time travel. We can't go back in time to see exactly if this is how it happened the way we think it happened. So all we can do is use our knowledge and our evidence to build support for the theories that we have, right? Now, an interesting thing about the atomic theory is that just recently this image was made using a quantum microscope, which is an interesting idea in and of itself. But here you actually can see the electron cloud that was made from the electrons spinning and spinning around the atom, and then you can see the proton in the center here, right? And so this is the closest that we've got. And so maybe at some point, people will make an actual real picture of an actual atom with its proton and electron, more than just this little fuzzy thing that came out of a computer. And then we will finally settle that atoms are real. But until then, it'll stay as the atomic theory. And for evolution, we will keep learning about the theory of evolution, even though we can't go back in time. So again, the idea is this is what we think happened. This is the model of the evolution of life on Earth. How did it actually happen? And why do we think this? How do we know this is what happened, right? Where's the evidence? And so the only way to go back in time is with fossils. Fossils, of course, are a huge part of our understanding of evolution because it allows us to look back in time, right? Now, most people think of fossils as just bones, and of course they are bones. Skulls are a big one because skulls have, we can look at skulls and try to get information about the brains of the individual or whatever we're looking at. But it's not just bones. We have fossilized wood. We have sometimes animals trapped in fossilized tree sap that we call amber. And then sometimes we just have imprints of things. We have circumstantial kind of evidence that we don't have the actual leaf, but we can see that there was a leaf that was crushed in the mud here and left an imprint in the rock as the rock formed, right? And so fossil evidence has a ton of different resources that we use to come up with our ideas of how this is all going to work, right? And so we're going to start with fossils. Now, we can't actually look at all the fossils. And so instead, we're going to have to kind of do this activity, right? So you're going to get, oh, where did it go? Hopefully you can see that. You're going to get a piece of paper that looks like this, or a digital piece of paper that looks like this, right? And it's going to be linked down here to a spreadsheet that has fossil data, right? And so before I get to the spreadsheet that is about the fossils, here's the basic idea, right? We want to analyze the fossil data for information about biodiversity. Biodiversity is the variety of forms of life on Earth, right? The number of different species, right? The richness is what you might remember. The number of totally different life forms. And then there's this other one called relative abundance, which is how common compared to each one they are, right? And so the first one's just a number. The second one is more of a percentage. But in any case, we're going to stick mostly with the richness part, right? And so we want to know how biodiversity has changed over the course of the Earth's history, right? And so there are three hypotheses for how this could have happened. Hypothesis number one: all life on Earth appeared at the same time in Earth history, and as a result, biodiversity has remained the same throughout Earth's history, right? So there are people that believe that everything is exactly the way it was at the beginning of the Earth's history as it is now, and that actually nothing has changed. Biodiversity has remained the same. The second hypothesis is that present-day forms of life arose from other forms of life over a considerable amount of time, and as a result, biodiversity has increased throughout Earth's history. This is the evolution idea. And then finally, there is a third possibility. All life on Earth appeared at the same time. However, the current life forms are the survivors of one or more catastrophic, meaning huge events that wiped out many other life forms that once inhabited Earth. As a result, the biodiversity on Earth has decreased, right? And so in this third one, everything showed up at the same time, but then some things have gone extinct because of different events. And what we're left with is just the survivors of everything, right? So three hypotheses remain the same. It has increased or it has decreased throughout the Earth's history. Now, your job is to support those with claim and evidence reasoning. So you're going to choose one of those claims as your claim, right? One of these three claims goes into your claim box. You are then going to put down what are the incorrect claims, right? Because what we're going to look for evidence for our claims. We're also going to look evidence that go against the other claims, right? And so how is the evidence? So you click on the link here and it takes you to something that looks like this, right? And so it would be awesome if we could look at real fossils, but the fact is that there are a ton of fossils out there, and you can never look at all of them. So what somebody did here is basically make a list of all the fossils broken down by the type of animal it is. So over here you can see these are all in something that says chordata, which means they have a backbone. And there's multiple types of animals with backbones, and so of course these are mammals, right? And so down this list you have a ton of mammal species. Lots of mammals. Oh, there's where it ends. And then you can see it goes to reptiles, and then there's a ton of reptiles, and then there's amphibians. And actually down there at the bottom you can see that there's these little tabs that will take you to just looking at the mammals or just looking at the reptiles. But I've always done this by looking at everything, all the families, right? And so that's the first thing. Of course, the problem here is that everything's in Latin. So we're going to have to use our Googling skills to try to figure out what these actual species are. But then over here on the actual table here, there's some more information we need. First off, the present time is all the way in the upper right-hand corner. It goes by millions of years ago. MYA stands for millions of years ago. And so 0.01 million years ago, that's like 10,000 years ago or something like that. Maybe 100,000. No, I'm pretty sure it's 10,000, right? And so that's all the way over on the right-hand side, right? Like maybe when you click on the document, it will, it'll be, the slider will be over here, but you want to go all the way to the right-hand side to get the most current, and then going back in time towards the left. It goes all the way back in time to 590 million years ago, right? That's pretty much the beginnings of animals that we can actually get like evidence for, right? So it goes way back, 590 million years. Then each box represents one of the time periods, and then in the box there will be one of three things. Either a one. A one means that there is a fossil of this type of organism from this time, right? So this little box that I have highlighted right there is a 7 million year old fossil of whatever this thing is, right? So how do I know what this thing is? I have to copy it and then go and actually Google it to try to figure out that this is something called an echidna, which is a type of actually a marsupial. So it's like an offshoot of, or a monotreme actually even. They lay eggs, an offshoot of the mammal group. I mentioned those briefly in one of their videos, right? And so we have a fossil. We know that echidnas are at least 7 million years old because there are fossil echidnas from that time period. Now, if there's a blank, that means we have not found a fossil, right? So there's no fossils of this echidna going earlier than 7 million, so some 13 million on back. There's nothing. There are some question marks. The question marks are usually where you have a gap, right? So here's one fossil of whatever species this is. Let's see what this one is. It is what is it? Go. Oh, it's still an echidna. Did I not do the thing? Am I messing up my own video? Yes, I am. Copy. Let's just make it copy for reals this time. Yep, just videotape myself using the computer wrong. I don't even know what these things are. They don't have a picture of them, right? That's true. Like maybe these, a lot of fossils are only like little small bones, and so you don't have the complete skeleton necessarily for whatever reason. I don't know, but there is a fossil of it from 104 million years ago. And then there's a gap here, and there's another fossil of it from 143 million years ago, right? So in this little gap right here, there should be fossils, but we just haven't found them yet. And this is very true of the fossil record, right? All we have are the things that have been dug out of the ground, and there's a lot of ground that hasn't been dug up yet. And so there could be fossils all over the place that we just haven't found. Right? So that's the basic idea, though, is that you're going to be going through here and looking for fossils of all these mammals, right? And you can see all these mammals, they all were found in this kind of time range right here. And then you have under that, again, there's the reptiles, and some of these reptiles go way back. Here's one that goes all the way back, whatever a Sphenodontidae is. Maybe I can do this right this time. I did. And that is a Tautara, which is a very interesting lizard type of creature. It's not actually a lizard. And they are really interesting because they are very old, and actually they have a third eye. They have this like thing in the middle of their head between their two eyes that doesn't look like an eyeball. It just looks like this little circle of skin that's a different color than the rest of their skin. And it actually can see light. Like if a bird, a predator were to fly over them, like the thing could see the shadow through its top head eyeball thing, right? Very interesting. In any case, the Tautaras, they go back, way back. Like I said, they're pretty old, all the way to, 229 million years ago, right? So these are the kinds of things that you can find here. I highly encourage you to go through all of these, right? Don't just stop at the mammals. There's insects, and then it goes even below the insects. It's going to get to eventually gastropods, which are snails, cephalopods, which are kind of like squids, and then you have brachiopods, which are a different kind of, I think those are actually sea sponges, like SpongeBob. And then you get to plants, right? And then after that, you'll get to some bacterias. This is an interesting one. Look at all those ones going all the way back to the beginning. Those are all cyanobacterias, which are called blue-green algae sometimes, very old organisms. In any case, you need to go through here and find pieces of evidence to put into your evidence, and then explain why that evidence proves your claim, right? While you're doing that, now, if you did this completely, if you looked at all the things, if you went through the fossil data for a while before you started to actually answer, your evidence here will probably be the same thing down here, because some of the evidence for one of the claims, the most logical claim, that evidence will also counteract some of the other claims. But the reason that we have this box here is because there is a way that sometimes people will only find what they're looking for and ignore all this other stuff. So they'll tell me, oh, I have this claim and here's my evidence. And I'll say, yeah, that's awesome. You have the evidence. But you had to ignore all this other stuff that's more important than what you decided to talk about, right? So that's why there's two boxes here. Again, if you're going through all this, then these two boxes or these two sets of boxes are basically the same thing, because you probably found the right claim. Right? So there we go. The unity and diversity of life in fossils over time.